be set up when I come in. I'll set the camera. Students are
Conservation Commission for March 19th open. I will entertain a motion to approve our minutes from the past meeting.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Moving second, all those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. And we might as well right into our new public hearings. We have South Street, map 53, lot 17. Okay. If you want to get set up, I will read it into the record. Under the Wetland Protection Act in Chapter 131, Section 40 of Mass General Law, as amended in the West Bridgewater Wetland Protection Bylaw, Rules and Regulations, the West Bridgewater Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on March 19th at 6:30 p.m. in the McDonald Brown Conference Room, 65 North Main Street, for a notice of intent filed by Outback Engineering on behalf of Bill Panos to construct a new single-family home with associated amenities within 100 feet of a BVW, listed as map 35, lot 17, South Street. And we're open.
Are you ready for me?
A butter notification.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
There you are. Alrighty. So, as mentioned, we have a proposed single-family house going on. We have within the 100-foot buffer zone. We have a septic and a 4-bedroom house. Obviously, we don't have anything within the 50-foot. All the work that we're proposing has the silt fence going alongside the portion of the lot that's facing the wetland. We have we're going to have the roof drain, a downspout going to an infiltration chamber. We have a temporary strike site construction area here. It's going to be the gravel to help prevent mud, sediments, anything from coming into the site during construction. We will also be watching on the road, cleaning out any sediment that's traveled onto the road daily. And we have a concrete washout pit all the way over here away from our buffer zone and building.
South Street one.
And anything else on the that's pretty much the gist of it. Approved by Board of Health, all in standard with the stormwater management.
Your name again was?
Elise
just because
Tripp. Yep.
That's okay.
Elise Tripp from Outback Engineering.
Okay. All right.
I see we've got the PVC pipes with appropriate signage.
Yep. Yes, we have those marked on there. Yep. And I know we have a detail too on the second page of the temporary entrance pad and of the infiltration.
Mm-hmm.
John, do you have anything? Looking at your report, I'm guessing not. No,
Everything
met all the requirements.
As the plan will show, the area that they have marked with the PVC pipes will be a conservation easement.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to mention that only so that's not a surprise to everybody. Or anybody, let's say.
Yeah.
And so, as my report indicates, they have been working with us right from the start and made sure they got everything that the Commission wants on a plan. And so there's no issue. So I recommend approving the plan and closing the hearing and issuing a standard order of conditions.
Okay. Anybody questions, comments?
I'm all set.
All right. Right. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close.
I'll second it.
Moving second. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. And a motion to issue the standard order of conditions.
Make that motion.
I'll second it.
Moving second. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you, Bill. Take care.
Give her a bonus.
All right. Next, we have on the agenda Belmont Street.
Oh no, that's okay.
I'll let you get set up if you want, and I'll read it into the record.
Yeah, my collection of stuff here, huh? Thank you, though.
Just for the commission, you'll see 3 different Belmont Street plans. One is their set, which is the CP final. And then there's a thing called ours and then a thing called theirs. So we'll talk about that after they make their presentation.
All right. And under the Wetland Protection Act, Chapter 131, Section 40 of Mass General Law is amended in the West Bridgewater Conservation Commission bylaw rules and regulations. The commission will hold a public hearing March 19th at 6:30 in the McDonald Brown Conference Room, 65 North Main Street. A notice of intent filed by Hermano and Hermano Consulting Engineers on behalf of William Adams to construct a driveway, 2 apartment buildings, on-site septic system, parking lot, garages with required stormwater, dry detention basins. It's a 40B comprehensive permit for map 13, lot 58, Belmont Street. We're open?
Green cards.
And,
Green cards.
yep. Green cards?
Yes. John, Kitty, members of the board.
Yep.
Good evening. Thank you for hearing us. We don't have green cards. We have certificates of mailing.
I like
Okay.
that just
That'll
as well.
suffice.
That'll work.
All per the certified abutters list. They've all been properly notified.
What do we got?
All right. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice tonight. Thank you for hearing us. As you've explained, we do have a 40B comprehensive permit before you. A little background on the project. We've been through ZBA. Bill, correct me if I'm wrong. Is it totally been finalized? I know they voted on it. We still have a matter of...
The meeting's been closed, the hearing's been closed, and the decision has been granted.
For the record, I am Walter Herman, OPE, and I'm representing Mr. William Adams for Old Bridgewater Place LLC tonight. Mr. Adams is in the front row. Thank you. So we went through numerous meetings with the ZBA. What we have before you is a project that involves 2 apartment buildings on a 16.75 acre lot. The 2 buildings are identical, call it symmetrical buildings. And we have a proposed roadway that goes around the buildings, but first, this is the only access through Belmont Street, and the locus is hash marked here. There's an access granted by the owner of this property to access the rear lot. And for clarification purposes, if you see this line right here, everything on the inside of the project is within a zone 2. So I'll get off of the first sheet here, but I just wanted to clarify everything to the inside of that line to the left is within a zone 2, protected drinking water resource. This is existing conditions. We have the BBW for the maple swamp that has been already delineated and accepted. We have an ORAD for that. The line essentially follows this right here, all of these numerous points. The access, as I explained, is through this easement. The applicant owns this house right here, and the surrounding properties are obviously the abutters. Of this 16.75 acre site, roughly half of that is what we would consider uplands. Of that uplands, there's close to a little more than 6 acres that would be the limit of the project. Of that 6 acres, as I'll explain on the subsequent sheets, roughly 2.73 is to be considered impervious. That's what we're proposing to develop on the property. And we have accounted for all impervious surfaces per the Wetlands Protection Act stormwater management requirements. I'll go ahead one sheet. Okay. This would be a private paved way, 24-foot width with a sidewalk coming into the property. That's the first building right there. We have one crossing proposed through an intermittent stream. Given the location of this access easement, this is the best crossing, the best angle that we could complete in order to get to the rear of the property. The limited project access right here for this one crossing involves 2,752 square feet. Currently, there's a dirt road / car path to access the rear of the property. And that is slightly to the right, but that's an area I'll get into later that will probably mitigate. Back to this other sheet here. This is where the two would connect. You now come into the property from this crossing. We have a proposed roadway all the way around. We have extensive parking. This was a serious concern of the ZBA. There are other projects in town that they cited they wanted, wish they had more parking available, so they were very pleased, I believe, to hear that we were meeting at least the bylaw, if not a little more than the bylaw requirements. Yet the bylaw does not pertain because it's a comprehensive permit. Still, we were able to manage to fit 121 parking spaces on the property, of which at least 57 of them will be garage spaces. We have numerous garages proposed around the project. We have a common building in the middle. We have a raised system that will go up in this area. There's been numerous test pits done across the property. We have identified this area as the most appropriate for a septic system. The soils are marginal across the property, but they tend to be most favorable up in this area. We also have some infiltration proposed where we've done additional test pits. This is to infiltrate clean runoff from the roofs. I can explain that on subsequent sheets, but we have infiltration in this area and infiltration over here to account for 1/4 of each one of these buildings. We also have infiltration behind the proposed garages to account for half of the runoff from all the garages. All of that was necessary given the paved surfaces and the stormwater detention ponds. They're actually dry ponds. These are large enough to accommodate all the runoff from the site. We've diverted catch basins. We've included the cyclonic separators, or storm scepter, if you would. They're a nice feature. The catch basins do catch a lot of the sediment. They catch oils as well. They'll have hoods on them. Pardon me for 1 second. But there's a storm scepter, basically, on each of the forward and the rear portions of the project. We're using the elevation of the property the best we could to our advantage. The high point's going to be in the middle. From here, drains that way. From here, will drain this way. We also have some along the roadway that's going to drain to its own storm sector. These two basins are called dry ponds. They're designed 2 feet above the high water table. They're designed to dry, and they're designed to empty within 24 hours. We have overfills. We have outlets. And all of this parking is accounted for with this system. There are no sources to come off of this site that do not go through the treatment train that I've just outlined. This sheet here is just proposed drainage and the actual water line plan. The water department wanted a certain size water line put on the property, and the fire department asked that we install it all the way around the property, around both buildings. We have at least 3 hydrants proposed, again to meet the fire department's concerns. And we have a turning radius that we increased, so the largest design vehicle for the fire department could get comfortably around the property. As you see, the buildings are quite built out, and they are very close to the sidewalks. But there's a nice sidewalk that does go around the entire property, also connects with a sidewalk that goes up to the street. There'll also be a little waiting area up in the front here for students to gather. When a bus would pick them up in the morning, there'll be a covered area. Landscape lighting, parking, and signage plan. We do have lighting proposed along the entrance and around the property. around the buildings. This was to delineate the number of parking spaces that we agreed upon with the zoning board of appeals. Landscaping, we do have some landscaping proposed, white oaks proposed, so different locations, about 50 feet, 75 feet apart, and you're coming in on the roadway. And there's others proposed along the top of the parking lot in this area. We have other plantings proposed as a shelter, rather a screen, if you would, between the project and the neighbors on this side. We don't have any on top of the septic system. That's to remain a grassy area. The septic system will be raised. It's a large septic system, but it's under 10,000 gallons per day. And that's to accommodate the 54 units in the building, a total of 90 bedrooms. 27 units in each building, and they'll all be discharging into this raised system. The system's actually more elevated than the 5 feet that's required because we've taken into consideration a mounding effect. So when it's all said and done, we will have a retaining wall in this area about 1 to 2 feet higher than the roadway. We have a reserve area proposed around this common building. We had to maintain an equal size for the reserve area. The septic plan is not done. It's not been before the Board of Health yet, but it has been all laid out, so we know that it would fit in this area. We provided an erosion control plan on an entirely separate sheet. This is all part of our stormwater management plan. We had a system of checks and balances with the review engineer through the ZBA process. Jacobs Driscoll Engineering, and they offered a lot of insight as to what could be added or provided for the project. Washout pits, for example, not on any steep embankments. We have proposed stockpile areas, so we have a construction entrance, and it's been peer reviewed by Mr. Driscoll, who's a professional engineer. Mr. Driscoll also went through our stormwater management report and offered some insight into managing the stormwater on the property. These are just detail sheets explaining infiltration structures, pavement details, sidewalk details. We also have flared end sections. This is for all of our piping, outlets that are on the property. I'll explain those in 1 minute. We have a block wall. We have extensive walls proposed on the project rather than slopes. The walls will afford us more use of the area and more protection of the surrounding wetlands.
So the driveway?
Excuse me?
Is it basically on the driveway?
No. I'll explain where the walls are. 1 second. We do need them for the crossing. We have a 30-inch pipe that we're proposing for an intermittent stream that does not have a substantial flow, even during wet periods. Dries up every summer, and other months, maybe late spring, late fall. But it is an intermittent stream. And we have a 30-inch pipe proposed in order to carry the flow from one side to the other. It starts up here in a rather isolated area of wetlands off-site, and it meanders its way through here into a larger wetlands area between our site and the railroad tracks. And on the other side, there's more. On the other side of the railroad, there's also more wetlands. There's a nearby Salisbury River, or as someone pointed out to me, it might be called, this portion might be the Matfield River. I still don't understand the difference between the two, but I will believe that person. So we can call it the Salisbury River or the Matfield River, but there is a river on the other side of that railroad track. We have outlets designed after all of our treatment. One right here. It's difficult to see on this plan. There's a lot of detail, but these are flat end swales at this location. There's another one up here at this location. That's 2. We have one also right here. And this one is to collect through systems of catch basins and curbing the runoff from the limited area of the roadway. So again, there's no untreated sources of runoff from the proposed project. The other outlets are right here. On this plan, you can see the infiltration basins that I was describing earlier. This one for this building, this one for that building, and these 2 in the rear for the garages. All the garages, they run off from the roofs. They're going to be gable end roofs, and half the roof will pitch into drainage pipes, which will discharge and infiltrate before discharging over on this side and on this end. So they also have flat end swales. We have sediment forebays. We have ponds, and we also have an emergency overflow berm for each one of these ponds. This flows will be significant, yet each one of these was designed to accommodate storms all through the 100-year 24-hour storm event. Any questions at this point?
John, do you want to ask any of yours at this point, or you want to wait? I mean,
I'll wait until he's finished.
Okay.
Thank you. For this project, we have a total proposed wetlands alteration of 4,987 square feet, of which a lot of that is right here with the initial crossing to get to the rear of the property. The other areas are small finger-like areas right here of maybe 60 square feet. Another finger-like or thumb-like area, if you would, right here, 325 square feet. We have a proposed area over here, and that one amounts to 1,160 square feet. We have a proposed area over here that amounts to 690 square feet. To mitigate that proposed taking, we have enlisted a gentleman by the name of Ken Thompson, a botanist who has seen the site, and he's provided a mitigation plan for us that we've already submitted. I couldn't do it justice as he would, but I will try to explain it in brief. He has described areas over here and areas around here for mitigation, and the total mitigation comes to 5,876 square feet, which is more than what is actually proposed to be taken. The exact ratio escapes me at the moment, but it's definitely more than 1-to-1, which is the requirement of the Wetlands Protection Act. We also have snow removal areas on the project at various points. I've done my best to keep them away from any proposed wetlands areas. It's not always the case. There are areas that will ultimately receive snow. It's determined by the snow removal services. I should point out that Mr. Adams is going to be maintaining this project, and we could probably elaborate more on snow removal if necessary. So a little more about the mitigation report, mitigation plan, as Mr. Thompson has provided. He describes the proposed conditions. He gives the introduction, as I've explained. He feels that he has designed this, and I've read through his report, and I can concur with him. He's designed the areas that are adjacent to the proposed taking. He's designed them also at a similar water table, similar length and width, and the plant species that he's proposed in these areas are delineated in the rear of his report. He has proposed native species, not invasive species. They're red maple, black tupelo, winterberry, and I believe it's spice bush. I'd have to get my glasses back on to read that. He has a plan for monitoring them. He would be on site. Everything's documented in his mitigation report. We would retain existing soils on the property in order to restore the wetlands, the repligation areas. It's preferred to use existing material that's already out there in order to reestablish the wetlands in those areas. We've kept them as close as possible to the limits of the proposed work. The design, as you can see, lots of right angles. That's very common with parking. We don't provide circles, triangles for parking. We have a nice flow around the property. And we've taken into consideration many different viewpoints and different requirements and different comments in order to get to this point of the project. We've actually been working on this, Bill, I think we've been plotting and doing numerous variations and different iterations for over 2 years now.
Right.
So what you can't see, and I don't expect you to understand, but this is the culmination of that effort over that amount of time. So what you have before you is a proposal to for the Wetlands Protection Act in regards to this commission and your authority is to fill less than 5,000 square feet. And that is within your jurisdiction to allow that. They have provisions for rebutting the significance of the resources that are of the interest to the Act. I just wanted to go through them slightly. One being public or private water supply. As I pointed out, we are within a Zone 2. That Zone 2 is for the West Bridgewater municipal wells. The nearest well is more than 500 feet away. And that Zone 2 encompasses an area that's close to, by rough estimates, I didn't measure it to a square foot, but maybe 35 square miles. We have a project that's proposing a footprint of close to 6,000 square feet and 6 acres, and 2 to 3 of that's going to be impervious. And we have accounted for all the runoff on the project to meet or beat the standards, the 10 standards required in the Act. So I feel that we've overcome the first public or private water supply interest of the Act. I don't understand how it could possibly affect the wetlands, the wells that far away with the items that we presented on our project. The second one is to groundwater supply. Again, not likely. There's 5,000 square feet of the swamp that is proposed to be disturbed and then replicated. It's not like 5,000 square feet filled in and we walk away. We're replicating more than the 5,000 square feet.
What's the 100-foot wetland line on that? What's the 50?
That's the 50, and that's the 100.
So a lot of the 50 is running right through.
Excuse me?
So a lot of that is running right through the 50-foot, no touch.
Our bylaw doesn't
But it's-
approve,
Yes,
apply to this. It's a 40B.
Oh, it's a 40B, yeah.
Yep.
because it is a 40B.
Figures.
We've minimized the impact to the BBW. As I explained, a lot of factors were considered to get it to this point. So I've kept the impact to what I believe would be the minimum. Now, the other concern would be flood control. Floodplain is 65 feet, which is somewhere off in the wetlands. We're roughly at 67 or 68. I don't see how we're going to impact the flood control with the development of this project. we've accounted for all of our stormwater runoff. Storm damage prevention, again, not likely. Again, we have the treatment system to account for runoff from our storm events. To the prevention of pollution, we have a treatment system that's going to remove sediments. It's also an improvement for removing oils with the cyclonic separators, storm scepters. Every drop of water off of the paved surface has to go through one of the 3 storm scepters. And they're a very wonderful and innovative device. There's no variations of it, but they are an improvement on separating sediment and also oils. They can also separate some trash if trash gets by the catch basins, but every catch basin is going to have a hood on. So we have multiple devices in order to prevent pollution of the environment. We also have sediment forebays on the 2 dry ponds. And then they have to spill over into the dry pond itself. And we have a maintenance program, O&M plan, in order to maintain these ponds. So when enough sediment would accumulate, after so many monthly or quarterly inspections, there'd be a requirement to go out there and remove sediment. I do not foresee a lot of sediment building up in these 2 ponds, given the series of catch basins and the storm scepters that we're providing.
What about like in wintertime with salt, sand?
Salt, sand, it will pick up sand. Salt, if salt dissolves in the water, it's not designed to separate salt. This should be a good buffer, because you will have some infiltration. We're not asking for a credit for it, but the soils are somewhat permeable, so you'll have additional infiltration, or rather filtration of compounds or pollutants. To protection of fisheries, there are no identified fisheries on or affected by the project. And to protection of wildlife habitat, there is no estimated rear wetlands wildlife habitat for the project. Well, I hope I've explained in short, tried to rebut that the interests of the Act are satisfied here, that they're not considered significant due to the proposed development and the features of the treatment system that we've offered. That's it for now. Would you like to add anything?
Anybody have any questions before John gives his report? Or you want to let John go and then...
Let John go and we'll ask questions around that.
All right. So I'll read from my report so it gets into the record. I'll skip the first part, which Walter has already explained the background and how it was approved by the ZBA and their review engineer. So I'll start where it says the wetland issues the Conservation Commission needs to resolve involve the filling of 2,752 square feet of wetland for a road crossing to access the development site. It is my opinion that the road crossing qualifies for a limited project status as long as it meets the required criteria of the Mass DEP wetland regulations. The requirements for the limited project exemption are all of the following items. The crossing can be the only way to access into the site, and Walter explained that. The width of the crossing must be no more than the minimum required to safely access the site, and I agree that it is the minimum and not a lot more. The wetland crossing needs a culvert to equalize the flow to prevent ponding or flooding on one side or the other. The filled wetland needs to be replicated on the site, and the engineer has shown how these limited project requirements can be met. The project also involves 4 other wetland filling areas. these areas are not exempt from the Mass DEP regulations. These areas are being filled for the convenience of the developer and, in my opinion, are not necessary. 310 CMR 10.553 sets the presumption regarding the BVW, and it reads as follows. Where a proposed activity involves the removing, dredging, or altering of a bordering vegetated wetland, the issuing authority, which is you, shall presume that such area is significant to the interest specified in 310 CMR 10.551. This presumption is rebuttable and may be overcome upon a clear showing that the bordering vegetated wetland does not play a role in the protection of said interests. In the event that the presumption is deemed to have been overcome, the issuing authority shall make a written determination to this effect. The Commission would have to set forth the grounds of how they determine that the wetlands are not important to the protection of those interests on Form 6. That's a DEP form. It is my contention that the applicant has not provided the Commission with proof that the wetlands being filled don't play a role in the protection of the various interests specified in 310 CMR 10.551. The burden of proof is on the applicant. Walter has just gone through some basic concepts of how the project meets the interests of the Act, but he hasn't talked about how those wetlands that they plan to fill, other than the limited project, don't play any important role in the protection of those interests. So it also, 310 CMR 10.554B states the issuing authority may, and I'll emphasize, may issue an order of conditions permitting the work which results in the loss of up to 5,000 square feet of bordering vegetative wetland when you can see that there is a need to do it and that the wetlands serve no purpose in protecting the interests of the Act. So my report indicates that you may, the language is may issue, and it's not a privilege to the developer to use that to fill wetlands. I gave the developer team a heads up about the filling of other areas other than the limited project at the very first meeting that this project was discussed with the various town boards, and suggested to them that the filling of wetlands for their convenience is not something that the Commission would like to see. So then they got to the first Zoning Board of Appeals meeting, and I stood up and said the same thing, that you can't fill the wetlands for your convenience. Later on in the process, I was invited to the meeting of the ZBA towards the end of the whole process, and I was still surprised to see that they hadn't budged and still maintain that they have to fill those wetlands for what I say is their convenience. Never once did they say why they have to fill them and why they can't minimize or avoid them. So in your handout that I gave you for taking home and reviewing, because I don't expect that you can digest that whole section on BVWs from the DEP's regulations, but 10.554 general performance standards you'll see under B where the may is in that quote that I just gave you, but at the bottom of that section, under number 7, in the exercise of this discretion, the issuing authority shall consider the magnitude of the alteration and the significance of the project site to the interest identified in the Wetlands Protection Act. The extent to which you also have to consider the extent to which adverse impacts can be avoided, the extent to which adverse impacts are minimized, and the extent to which mitigation measures, including replication or restoration, are provided to contribute to the protection of the interest identified in the Wetlands Protection Act. The cutting down of the buffer to the edge of the wetlands, including the trees and shrub layers and the herbaceous layers to and this is in the buffer, not the wetlands itself, to then try to replicate a natural wetland, which is almost impossible to do. They're talking about replication of some 5,000 square feet. They're only filling how many, Walter? A little less than 5,000, about 4,000.
4,987.
So where do you get the additional wetland soils that aren't on the site? Does your wetland scientists discuss that? Because you're going to have a deficit of the natural soil that you claim you're going to stockpile. And it's been my experience that when the contractor strips the wetland areas that they're going to fill, and they stockpile it, it gets mixed with the other materials, and so it's not the same natural wetland soil that was in place at the spot where they disturbed it. So it's well-known fact that restoration areas don't come up 100% to what it's intended, and DEP even talks about that they only expect 75% of the wetland restoration to work, and they're willing to forget the other 25%. So that's why they emphasize that it should be avoided, it should be minimized whenever you disturb wetlands, and they have to be able to disturb the limited project crossing because they have no other access to the site, and it's an exemption, and DEP would allow it, and the Commission should allow it. The others, I can ask the engineer to explain why they can't avoid it, and we could hear what they have to say, and then I can present you with a plan that shows how I feel they could avoid it. So, Walter, how can you not avoid filling those wetlands?
To answer one of your previous questions, John, if I may, I do believe in the mitigation report, Mr. Thompson has presented how the soils would be stripped out of the proposed wetlands areas and carefully stockpiled. And if any additional soils are required, I do believe in here he does demonstrate or explain what type of soils will be necessary to make it wetland soil. So I can let Ken speak for that at another meeting, but I'm confident in Ken Thompson's work. As I've explained for the project, we have a design here that shows 2 of the buildings and a lot of the required parking. The parking is significant, and it has taken up a lot of area on the project. A couple of the areas that we talk about right here are small and finger-like, and if we could continue reading out of the Wetlands Protection Act, if I may. After the section that John referenced, at the end of that section, Notwithstanding the provisions of 310 CMR 1055-4A, the issuing authority may issue an order conditions permitting work which results in the loss of a portion of a bordering vegetative wetland when said portion has a surface area less than 500 square feet. 2, said portion extends in a distinct linear configuration, finger-like, quotation marks, into adjacent upland area. So, right there.
So in my opinion, you've got, if they are willing to exercise that discretion, because it's not automatic, you just read it, they may allow it. It doesn't mean they have to. But let's just say that if you do have one finger-like projection, which I agree there is one there, whether you have a right to fill it is another story. But the other one, you called it a thumb-like, and that doesn't qualify. So, but that, regardless, how is it that you can't avoid it?
Well, what I was trying to point out was those two areas, okay, we don't have to rebut. It's not required. All right, and
What's that?
those two finger-like areas that I just read right there out of the Act,
Yeah.
it does not demonstrate, just doesn't explain you have to rebut those small areas. So I just wanted to.
So in order for the commission to
And they may
exercise their discretion, they have to be able to tell DEP on Form 6 why those two areas are not worthy of protecting for the interest of the Act. So what have you got to tell them and me so that I can put it in the Form 6, that other than that they meet the 500 square foot threshold and finger-like projection, how is it that they aren't beneficial to the protection of the interest? You have to tell us so that we can put that in there. They're not going to come up with and make something up on their own. You have to do it.
Excuse me, John. I did read off the interest, I believe,
So
right out of the Act.
we would need that in writing. So that's number
well,
one.
We're getting to that then.
And we will discuss it once you put that in writing.
And I could clarify it and expand upon it in writing.
So what about the other
First
areas
introduction
that are
to
not
my
finger-like
project.
projections?
Again, these areas, John, I've presented a design that we feel for this design and to accommodate parking that the town's requested, we would need these areas.
So could it be avoided?
By town bylaw, excuse me if I can, how many extra parking spaces are in here above what the town's requiring you to do?
They have a requirement of 114.
Needed for this project?
Right.
And you've created how many?
And that's a minimum.
Right,
We have
Yep.
121.
121, okay.
So
And they also said there was a problem with an existing 40B project, and they'd like to see more parking than even the requirement. So we tried to squeeze every area we could to accommodate that, what they were asking us.
Does that include the garages? Garage space?
that includes garage spaces. That's correct, sir.
Also, we had to accommodate the fire trucks going around the curves. Originally, we had that roads going around the buildings smaller. And we had a meeting with the fire department, and we actually got a measurement of a truck and went through that whole calculation to make sure it could make the curve and safely.
And if you didn't, what would happen? You wouldn't have the project, right?
It would
It'd be a smaller
safety
project.
concern. That's correct.
Yeah, it'd be a small project. So, like John's saying, with those spots right there, might be a problem. You might have to do something different to make.
So if you reduce back to is it 114, even though
They'd like to see more.
have more, if you went, where would you take them away?
I don't think we can reduce them. I think our permit is based on that amount of parking spaces. If we try to reduce it from 120 parking spaces, we're going to have to go back before the zoning board
Yeah, I'm sure.
and ask them to.
So you need to encroach the wetlands for parking.
Excuse me, 1 second, Bill. If they felt it was significant.
Right.
Because we've demonstrated on the plans that we attempted to meet the bylaw at 114. And we just provided a few extra
Right.
as a kicker because they had concerns about that. So if they felt it was a significant change, we would have to go back before them. We really are trying not to reduce parking spaces because they emphasized to us at several meetings that parking is very important to them, because I'm sure they received a lot of calls and have had some issues on other projects.
So, when you did this project, what happens if you did, was it, you said 25 and 27, or how many?
Each building has 27
So
units.
just say if you did 20 and 20, would you have been able to have done that as a project? Or is it something that this is what you have to have, this size,
You have
to
to have
squeeze
the-
everything in there?
You have to have enough apartments
I understand that,
to
but
offset the cost
but if
of
you
the
came in
building.
front and said, we're going to do 20 and 20 in each apartment, you would have had enough parking, enough probably,
Will lower the requirement of the parking.
yeah, and then
But
you
the
would have
building
been out
size
of the,
is wrong. Changing the building size from 27 to 20 is not going to make a significant cost difference. You're still going to be paying for the cost to build the unit
Well, that's
of the size of the
nothing to
building.
do, I understand that. I'm just talking about the whole project itself, of making it a little bit smaller to accommodate us, along with to help out with space with parking and all that.
Well, the areas,
Because I mean, I know everybody comes in here and they try to push everything right to the limit, right to the, and they just say, "Oh, well, this is what we have to have." Well, if you came in with a little bit of a smaller project, it would work out a lot easier, and you wouldn't have to be worrying about these little finger-like things for the wetland and all that stuff, and having to deal with that.
also
I mean,
those little areas, though, the state recognizes them as not a significant impact.
Who did?
So that's in the regulation.
No, it isn't. The state doesn't say
Talking
that.
about the fingerlings,
It says that the issuing authority, the commission, may allow it,
yeah.
provided you provide reasons why they can tell DEP why they're insignificant to the protection of the Wetlands Protection Act. So the state doesn't say you can do it. It's not a given right for you to do that. It's
I'm
a
not saying it's a
discretion.
given right, I'm saying it was a minimal impact.
And-
Minimal impact, I mean, this right here is a cart path that someone drove through, and there's tire marks, and the water is in the tire marks, and that's why they flagged it. So if that cart path wasn't even there, it wouldn't even be a wetland. You know what I mean? So, but
You don't
but
live
we
it now.
didn't go fill it in, we left
You
it the way
don't- you
exactly
don't
like it
live now,
was.
so-
But even if we give you the fingerlings that are there in the thumbprint, I mean, the thumbprint one I'm assuming is the bigger one, which is, I'm guessing you did it straight for the ease of the roadway and for fire access, so there wasn't a curve to have to go around if you tried to avoid it.
Right.
But the other two larger areas, I mean, what would you be giving up if you were not allowed to go into those wetland areas? 4 parking spaces, 3 parking spaces?
Well, actually, I've got a plan that shows they don't lose anything, and they don't have to fill anything but the limited project.
May I just clarify one point? I elected to go straight here, not just because I like straight lines and parking lots should be straight. I have a reserve area right here that I have to hold because this is new construction. In the event I need this reserve area, I cannot have that space taken like pavement. It's going to be a raised area. It would look ugly to build that around that proposed building, but that's the requirement of the state sanitary code, 310 CMR 15, which I cannot override. We have to abide by that code also.
All you have to do is show that you have the space, you don't have to have a design for the reserves. So if you're saying that you can't put it there because you may have to fill it in the future, you may not have to fill it in the future if you were to replace that septic system in place where it is today and repair it and improve it right where it sits today. So it's only a state requirement to show that you have the reserve area should you use it, but in practicality, every septic upgrade or repair is done in place, and you don't need to use it, and it's just at this point
It's required.
kind of a
That may be the case, John, but why do we show a reserve area?
to show that you have the space for it. And
That we may or may not use, agreed,
right.
but I can't treat it as if I'm not going to use it.
So Walter's saying that because my sketch that I'll show you kind of encroaches on that.
John, I'm not saying it's
We
right.
don't know whether Walter could rearrange the reserve area to accommodate what he needs to. He's just saying that he has to have one. So this is their plan. I've highlighted the limited crossing area. I've whited out the thumb-like projection by taking and putting in a modest curve in the access road. So you have all the parking right up to here with a curve that is adequate for a fire truck. There's no question about that. And what I've done is taking the garage that was up in this corner and the garage that was in this corner and relocated them down here in the snow removal areas, which still allows for plenty of room for snow removal areas behind this garage here, and put some parking over on the other side. I'm sure with some better drafting techniques than me just sketching on this plan that you could probably eke out some additional parking in other spots along the other side of the road, just like I showed here. There's no reason why there couldn't be some parking over here unless you have some reason to tell me, or over here. So, like I say, tweaking this a little bit more with the idea that we could avoid the wetlands instead of saying we don't have to, which is their position, and you heard it from the applicant. The state says we can do it, and that's not the case. You have to be convinced that you may be able to allow them to do it, considering the fact that it has no bearing on the interests of the Act, that the areas that they're filling. So I'm showing you here how all those could be avoided with just a few hours of looking at the plan and coming up with some sketches here. I'm asking them to tell us why that can't be done. You want me to leave it here?
Oh, please do, John.
Sure.
Please do. John forwarded me this plan, for the record, before one of our ZBA hearings. I think it was the last one. I took a look at it, John. I considered it. John shows up at the meeting. John, you were very emotional at the meeting. I even asked if I could get a turn to discuss with you this plan. You quickly put your papers together and ran out.
Well, I don't.
My door's always open.
I don't think that's the case. And you
Did you or did you not discuss this plan with me when I asked you to at the last ZBA meeting that we were attending?
during the meeting?
Right after you finished speaking.
But during the meeting when they were holding a hearing?
Prior to closing.
It doesn't matter. It's not a.
Okay, John.
It's not a meeting
We're
that
gonna play
we
this game.
discuss things. It's the zoning board of appeals.
Are you proclaiming that this is a plan drawn by a professional registered engineer?
So what's that got to do with it? I'm asking you if you could draw something like
Has a lot to
that.
do with it, John. I tried to explain to you that night. I did look at it. I get reasons why it can't be done.
Well, let's hear them.
Okay, yeah,
And
can we,
that's
because
what-
we're trying to figure out how we're going to allow you to go into these wetland areas.
Yeah.
There's two that are, I think, going to be bit larger issues, which aren't the fingerling issues. And if you can explain why you need to get into all of them, it might help move this.
I think the crossing is
A mute point. That has to be done. That's not going to be an issue. It's the other four areas that we just need justification and that we can live with.
I had these prepared January 22nd of this year, starting with Area A. It won't be an even swap. You need 3-foot island minimums on each side of the garage entrance next to the surface spaces. That's a design standard, and it's meant to facilitate vehicles safely getting in and out of spaces.
So are you saying that you can't take your CAD and meet those standards? I mean, maybe the sketch with a red pencil that's pretty thick, maybe it doesn't scale out properly, but are you saying it's impossible to put that concept into a CAD system and draw it up as a professional engineer?
Well, John,
So you don't have enough room to
we've
make
gone through
equal.
numerous iterations in CAD over 2 years.
But with the idea of minimizing and avoiding, did you try that?
John, your area that you show, how many? 1, 2,
Walter,
3,
a-
4,
ask-
5, 6, 7. Do I have the floor,
Ans-
sir?
answer-
Mr. Chairman, do I have the floor?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. These parking spaces are on top of a reserve area, which I've already explained.
So it's
I also design septic systems. I'm a evaluated soil inspector, and I design septic systems. I will not put proposed parking on top of the reserve area. There's a reason why the DEP has that in the state sanitary code. I'm not going to do that.
And there's a certain qualified amount of reserve you have to have.
Absolutely.
Doesn't mean that you
100%.
can't use any of it to park on it or anything like that, or any kind of use like walking on it or a playground area on it.
If this area was to be used for parking, I would have to jump this road and come up the equivalent or more as to what I explained would be the top of the wall around this system, and that was between 1 and 2 feet. So we're going to have a gaudy, ugly-looking area where I'm going to have to accommodate cars coming up over 2 feet from the existing roadway to possibly park on those areas. There's a certain amount of aesthetics that go into each project, and this is not sufficient, in my opinion. Area B, garages in place of open spaces on south side and retaining wall at edge of pavement. You need separation between the edge of pavement and the wall to install guardrail. Eliminates 3 compact spaces. 4 compact spaces and 3 standard will not fit in garage designed for 6 standard spaces. In this area, we need a guardrail around here. And I appreciate, John, your effort, and I did want to talk to you. I tried to talk to you about this because we've considered many iterations on the project. But the parking and the swapping and the rearrangements that you've laid out are not going to be sufficient. Even if I went to task and put it on AutoCAD, it's not going to fit that way. And I scaled it out by hand to prove to myself that wouldn't work before going through.
So you're saying that there's no way to adjust parking other than how I show it there to meet the concept of what I'm asking the commission to consider asking you to do?
Well, if I could, I'd like to finish the last area. I went through A, B, and C. No, I covered all 3. So,
All right, and then to
I've
address
refuted-
the question that you had at the zoning board,
I've
you
rebutted
had
this.
ample time to come anytime into the town hall, come into my office, and talk about this during your ZBA process and say, geez, John, we can't tweak this any better, we can't avoid the wetlands. Show me exactly why we could have had our discussion there, but you avoided that. And when you expect me to discuss that at a zoning board meeting, which I have no right other than to give my input to, it's not appropriate for you and I to have any discussions at that meeting. So that's why I left.
well, if I may, John, you're saying things that are not true.
What's not true?
You said at the ZBA meeting that I did not want to talk to you about this.
No, I'm talking about coming to the meetings, coming to my office in between meetings where you could address the 3 times that I told you about not filling wetlands for your convenience.
Well, those weren't invitations, if I may.
What were they?
Well, as quoted at our ZBA meeting, you warned us that wasn't allowed.
Yep. Yep, that's a warning.
I don't think that that's an invitation to come in and talk about this.
What do you
To
call
consider
it? If
alternatives.
you're being warned that that's going to be an issue, what do? Avoid it and just say, oh, I don't like warnings, and you don't come in? You should have come in and said, this is why we can't do that. We may have been able to figure it out, but so far you haven't shown me any reason other than you're saying that the drawing, which is a pencil drawing and a cut and paste covering up things, obviously it's not going to be precise and to scale.
But you presented it as it's correct, John.
Oh, come on, Walter. Anybody could tell that it's not drawn by
Why are we
CAD.
even talking about it then?
Because it's a concept, and it's to show you that you do have some alternatives and
I just
ways
went
to
through why
avoid.
those don't work, John. I've been doing this for 2 years on this project. I just explained why those don't work.
And it doesn't work because maybe the drawing is not to scale and it's a pencil and the thickness of a pencil is not like on a CAD line. So, yes, I understand what you're saying, but you haven't addressed the idea that you could avoid, minimize, and change the geometry of your project.
Well, in the rough scale format, and what I went through was by scaling off of my plan, thin pencil drawings, as accurate as I could be, I concluded aesthetically not pleasing. I know that's not significant to the board, but it is to me as a designer, and it is to the applicant as the owner and developer.
So what's
I
not?
wrote, may result, if I may, John, please, may result in a net loss of 8 or more spaces without accurately determining if that was going to fit. Right? 121 minus 8, you're down to 113. ZBA would like at least 114. We provided 121. Reserve area, sizing, and setback requirements. You know, you cannot curve the road to accommodate the above.
Why not?
This slight curvature in the road, well, I'm cutting into my reserve area, John. And if I ever needed that, now we're going to have to elevate the road. And that elevation may not make it. We're going to have a giant bump, or we're going to have a little curve. It's not standard engineering practice.
Okay, so if we're to say we're going to give you the crossing, we're going to give you the road straight there and not do the bump out to avoid any confusion with your reserve. Not saying you can't put a reserve under pavement, because I've seen plenty of septic systems put underneath parking lots lately. We're having to approve a bunch of them.
Yeah.
But that and the other fingerling little thing on the other side that you say is a cart path that somebody put ruts in and became a wetland. If those two are allowed to be used, can you re-engineer or do it to get rid of touching the other two spots? Or what's the reason that we're going to give you to do that? I mean, the engineering for your reserve, okay, we can maybe justify that to DEP and whatever. The other two, if it's just for convenience of having more parking spaces or for whatever, I mean, that I don't know whether that's going to fly. I mean, I need more than that.
It's not the convenience for the parking spaces, it's having the garages be able to fit, be able to turn into the garages. And
If you don't have as
go
many
around the
garages.
See, that's
Yeah,
what
what
I,
if they're just
garage-
parking spaces?
well, that's what I say. I mean, you come in with these projects, you push them right to the limit. Of course, there's going to be some things you're going to have to adjust and change. I mean, there's going to be some argument. Why don't you come in with something that is going to be
And is a
in the
garage
future?
necessary?
Yeah, no. And
If I
I
may,
mean, nice.
Mr. Chairman, may we take a short recess right now, of maybe 2 or 3 minutes, just so I can talk to my client?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is,
I'll take everything into consideration, and I just want to talk to my
yep,
client.
nope, that's fine.
Thank you, sir.
just push them right to the limit, and it just I don't want to give and take on anything. And
I'm not comfortable treating wetlands for parking spaces.
Yeah.
if they couldn't,
I understand that this is,
otherwise, what are they going to do? They're going to have to adjust it.
I don't
to
think
make
I
it work.
understand that totally.
Adjust it to make it work.
Ready when you are, Mr. Chairman.
All set. What do we?
Thank you, sir. All right, I have consulted with my client, and if I understand things properly, the two, what I described to be finger-like or thumb-like areas, you would concede.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some justification why you need to disturb them. I mean, it's. I just haven't heard that on those other two yet. And that's,
Understood, Mr. Chairman. What I have offered to my client is to go back to the drawing board to try and possibly look at any other alternative. But I just want to clarify. We never get this right from the first try. I could look at this 2 years from now and find a mistake on it. Okay? Did I say that on the record?
understood. I mean,
It happens.
and we were just sitting here talking, looking, and saying, okay, you have your proposed garages on the backside with a 15-foot.
Yeah.
Is that a grass strip in between them, or is it a?
No, there's infiltration proposed at the rear.
Okay.
So
I mean, we were just looking at all these open spaces that.
Yeah.
I mean, again, if it wasn't a garage, it was just a parking space. Is.
No.
And that's why, if you're willing to go back and take a look and see what we can come up with to tweak it,
Right.
then that's.
Hearing what you said, what your words, and that's important to the commission, I am willing, I've asked my client, and he'll task me to take a look at any other possible alternatives that I could put my stamp on that would work. So at this time, unless there's any more questions, we'd like to have a continuance so I could go back to the drawing board to try and find an alternative.
What are the
And
two
if John
areas
would
again?
like, I'd be glad to meet with him to show him the alternatives that we possibly could come up with
It would be.
prior to the next meeting.
I'd say that would
This
be a
would
good
be-
idea.
That's in play.
Yeah. Yeah. And this area over here.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like disturbing wetlands if we can avoid it anywhere, but understanding.
Well, the project
understanding
demands
from the
that the
roadway coming
50-foot
in.
buffer is waived. And right away, we're up against the wetlands. And then I think the feeling is, and now to take more, when that's already been, I mean, it demands
When-
that the 50 goes
In
away.
my opinion, it could have been avoided in the beginning, but with the project, the size of it. But I know how everything works. You just got to push it to the limit and hope for the best.
Well, we've changed this plan probably 1,000 times. We revise it for every board and every request of everybody that we've been before the board. So,
And if I could explain, this area over here, and I explained this to you, John, I'm an honest guy. That wetlands line I found to be slightly in error. And it was not, originally, it was not inside the proposed project development. And I said, well, I'm going to show it as it is, because I found that it was wrong. So we'll present it correct. And it happens to be, much to my chagrin, it's not in favor of my client. It's actually inside of his proposed area that he wants for the project. But I am willing to look at how I could possibly avoid the two areas on, call it the west and the east end, opposite ends of the project, to see if there's some way I could possibly avoid disturbing those areas. This,
One thing,
Okay, that's-
that
You can't see
garage
it.
on the far left of your drawing, and it's the one that's closest to that area in question, if you shortened up that garage and eliminated a space there and added a space somewhere else on the project, you'd be able to run that drain line right by the garage instead of into the wetlands.
Or instead of a garage there, if you could look at it as a parking spaces instead, or move. I mean, I've just thought. The only other question I would have is the snow removal. I know we've had that on a few. Is it removal areas or storage areas?
It's a removal area.
Well, it's
we
a
call
storage of the removed snow.
Right. I mean, it's going to be there plowed and then removed after the storm, or is it staying there until you have to move it because there's too much
if it's
snow?
a lot of snow, we have to remove it, we'd remove it.
So basically, it's going to sit there if there's not much.
If it's
It's going to sit there if there's not much.
if it's not much snow, if it's just
But then you
normal.
got other stuff that's in it.
The ones
They're barriers.
that are in front of the parking spaces, is there a chain link fence right in front of those, or no? Only because we're finding that we end up with a lot of debris getting plowed up and then gets blown in and washed into wetlands. And I'm just a little hesitant about putting storage next to anything that. It looks like the one at the catch basin, detention basins have a chain link fence in front of them.
There is a chain link fence shown. That was a recommendation by the review engineer. It was not a demand by the ZBA.
Yep.
And then we added that on there because we thought we needed that for approval. I think that might be a, well, we have a decision from the ZBA.
No, I was just wanting so we knew going forward what your intentions was with the snow removal, that it's going to be there and that's what's going to be stored until there's too much and then you're going to remove it from those areas.
And it's
Again,
removed
before,
primarily because there's sediment in it and potential to drain into the wetlands.
maybe there's some other areas we can consider for snow removal.
Okay. That was my only other question. And I will wish you very good luck planting the arborvitaes like you have proposed.
Yeah.
Even with a number of units, they'll be there a year, and then there'll be lollipops.
Yeah.
Because the deer are going to mow those down.
That's a great point. Do you have any suggestions that
I might look at spruces possibly, or junipers as an alternative. Another type of evergreen that isn't as preferred feeding.
Right.
Most nurseries can tell you what's deer resistant.
Yeah. Or not necessarily because there isn't anything really resistant, but
I lucked out?
not
I'll
preferred.
digress a little bit. 30 years ago, I planted 500 feet of what I call pyramidal arborvitaes in my yard, and I think they were an American arborvitae.
Yep.
The deer, never bothered them. My neighbors, they all lose whatever they plant. The deer stay away from my house.
Do you have a dog?
I have 2 little dogs.
That makes a big difference.
That helps.
too.
I doubt they'd be afraid of them, but
No, it's the smell and the
And
remains.
They sense just the smell as a threat. And,
Oh, okay.
yeah. They don't know, deer don't know whether it's a big dog or a little dog. They just know it's a
Where
little
they
dog.
must be helping out.
I have a question for the commission. The restoration replication, first of all, we need to have some examples of their wetland scientists' restoration successes that he has had in his career. In addition to, I'm suggesting that you have a 53G expert review the restoration plan, how it's going to be handled, and come up with some recommendations that we can incorporate in the order of conditions when and if this is approved. So you might want to think about that, and maybe at the next, well, even before the next meeting, if you want to get some prices on that, I can come up with a 53G that would review it. It's up to the commission if you feel
People
that.
feel on that.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Sounds like a
I mean,
So before the next meeting, I'll come up with someone who would review the restoration.
the
plan.
restoration part of the project.
Okay.
Have we reached the point, too, where we start talking about how we're demarking the wetland line? Or is that a little further along?
If I may, sir.
You can put it in the order of conditions, but if it's appealed for any reason, it wouldn't be considered by DEP. They don't require.
Is it possible we could give Ken Thompson an opportunity to explain his success stories? I
Yeah.
did not invite him tonight because I knew it was an introduction meeting.
No.
Before
Yeah,
we
he
get-
would.
pull
Yeah.
the trigger to have that.
Well, in the meantime, we'll get the price, but you can invite him to the next meeting.
That's fine.
Yeah, that would. Yeah. Any other questions from you? And when would you like us to continue it to?
Next week.
I know the busy season's really coming up the way for construction-wise, so
Next week's
you may be on site visits a lot.
We don't even meet
You meet
next
every
week.
2 weeks, right? So, I'm looking at your schedule, ladies and gentlemen. Is it April 2nd?
2 weeks.
Yep.
yeah, that's all.
Would that be enough time?
With
to-
a deadline to get stuff in a week ahead of time.
Yeah.
1 week to look at this and do this. Can I have your word that I have no other task to do except this?
That's it, I'll leave you alone for a week.
Let's please try for April 2nd.
Okay. And if
You can always.
things, we can move it to the 16th.
Right.
But, okay. I'll entertain a motion to continue to April 2nd.
Motion to continue.
I'll second it.
Moving second. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great night.
Good luck.
Thank you for your time. There you go, Tom.
Next on our agenda, we have map 33, lot 22, North Main Street. Getting that pile. I'll let you set up. Okay. Read that into the record. Under the Wetland Protection Act, Chapter 131, Section 40 of Mass General Law is amended in the West Bridgewater Wetland Protection Bylaw Rules and Regulations. The West Bridgewater Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on the 19th March 2019 in the McDonald Brown Conference Room, 65 North Main Street, by notice of intent filed by James Raines on behalf of Mass Electric for the installation of a new wood pole structure located along existing transmission line right-of-way, map 33, lot 22, North Main Street. We're open. And you have green cards?
Yes, I do.
I'll take those. Thank you.
Okay, just for the record, I'm Dan Herzlinger from TRC Environmental. James Rines is also from TRC Environmental. He prepared the notice of intent for this project. And we are here on behalf of National Grid for a maintenance project on some transmission lines that traverse West Bridgewater. This is the L1 E20 fiber connection project. And I'll give you a quick overview. This is mandated maintenance work that National Grid is required to do on the lines, some lines here in town. It's one little piece of like a larger portfolio of projects that they're working on in the area. So the site location is at a major junction of several transmission lines. If you go down up the street and down the rail trail, you have the big right-of-ways there. There's several circuits. There's the L1 circuit and the E20 circuit. These are 115 kV overhead transmission lines. So really, this is a very straightforward, simple project. What they need to do is basically run an overhead line between two existing structures. And in order to support that new overhead line, they need to install one new wood utility pole to provide enough clearance for the line. So to orient you, this way is down towards Main Street. So if you go out the rail trail along the red line here that shows sort of the access route, these orange lines represent the transmission lines. The structures are shown as squares. So what they're going to do is, again, splice this line between structure 218 on the E20 line, splice it from structure 218 to structure 2 on the L1 line. It's about 250 feet overhead distance. And then pretty much halfway between the structures is where the new pole is going to go. That's represented by the orange circle there. The pole is about a 30-inch diameter. The culvert for the pole is 30-inch diameter. So they put a culvert in the ground. That sort of functions as the foundation for the wood utility pole. And there's going to be some associated hardware they have to put onto the structure and the utility pole to hold the overhead line. As far as wetland resource areas that you find at the site, we have 2 wetlands. There's a very large wetland system here. We've flagged this area before. James went out just recently and reflagged it. It's been the site of many projects we've done for National Grid. I think I had a very similar project several years ago on the other side of the railroad, the old railroad line here. So you've got a BBW on this side, BBW on that side, the toe of the slope, very straightforward wetland line there. And as far as the work goes, National Grid will use their standard practice of using swamp mats, timber swamp mats, to access wetland areas. Those are depicted in with the hatching. We sort of show sort of our maximum extent of what we think they might do. They usually use less than this, but these sort of are just 50 by 50 work pads They'll have like a bucket truck to reach up to the structures. They'll have one of the trucks that has the auger, use one of the auger trucks to drill the hole to the pole, put it in, and hook up the rest of the equipment. Most of the work, the matting work is exempt under the Wetlands Protection Act, is for access for utility maintenance projects. The pole is really the only piece that we feel is not exempt under the Wetlands Protection Act. We feel it is eligible as a limited project. It's part of maintaining the grid. And the project is going to have 5 square feet of impact, of impact to the wetland there. Really minimal. It's about the size of a standard utility pole. So, and again, there's really not much we can do to avoid this location. Because of the engineering constraints, it has to be basically halfway between the two structures.
Sagging the line.
Yeah, exactly. Sagging the line, so we don't have much option here. That's an overview of the project, the resource areas, the impacts. Last thing I'll talk about really quick is just, during construction, again, we're going to use the construction mats as a BMP. We typically have an inspector on site. We do regular inspections on our projects. It's just sort of standard practice that we do for grid, so we'll be doing inspections, filing inspection reports. And if we need to use any erosion controls, probably be a field game time decision as to whether they're needed. It's just really just one day of work to put the pole in, so if it appears we need to put in the erosion controls, we can do that temporarily while they're working. I think that's all I really wanted to cover. So,
You're going to be using the rail trail as the access?
yes, and they've done that. I know they've done that in the past in their projects. Yes, but
And what is the time frame?
They would like to do this work in May.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the plan. So that's
So they're really not going to be doing anything other than the hole's going to be just dug and hole put in, and that's it.
Yeah.
They're going to be driving in it.
They'll have to get into just to get to these structures to hook up the connect the
And you're going to be on the road
but-
for doing that.
What's that?
You're basically going to be on the road for doing that, right?
Yeah, they're going to work off the rail trail. Yeah, I think they would probably stage the equipment for the pole right here on the rail trail, reach down, maybe with some supporting equipment over here on the timber matting.
The mats work well, I know.
Yeah.
A couple areas I've seen that
Yeah.
they go back.
Yeah, I agree.
And they're not going to be on this site that long.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been others in town where they've been
Quite a
down
while,
for
yeah.
9,
Yeah,
10
we did.
months at a period, and
Right.
vegetation takes a long time to recover.
Right.
This is fairly quick. John, any
I
questions?
only have one question. Just like the engineer before you, I'll play the PE card. Did an engineer prepare this?
Yes. So I did include this, not this plan here.
Okay, I'm only kidding. I just making a point. So I have no issues.
Anybody else questions?
No.
Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
What's the proof you want to hit the wetland for? Just shaking your head.
Motion to close. A second. Moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. A motion to grant a 50-foot waiver of work.
I'll second it.
Moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. And a motion to issue the standard order of conditions for utility work and maintenance.
I'll second it.
Moved and second. All in favor? Aye. So moved. Thank you.
Thank you.
And let's hope for a dry May.
Yeah.
Never know.
Thank you.
All right. Next on our list, I believe we have Maple Scotland Street, sign an ORAD.
Before we get into that,
Yeah.
I'd just like to compliment you fellows because during the whole process you made constant contact with the office to make sure that things were being done the way that we needed it done. So I want to compliment you on that. So it's always best to touch base with us instead of walking in and plopping it down. So thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
James did all the work, so it's just wasting a lot. So,
Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Okay, Maple Street.
Maple Street, Scotland Street.
This is the
extension.
ANRAD that was not able to be closed at the previous meeting that we had. because they hadn't a file number issued on it at that point. So we heard the presentation. There was no issues. It was just a matter of continuing the public hearing until tonight, where we could close it and issue an ORAD. So that's what my recommendations are.
Sign. The sign. Is that what it was? The sign? No.
No, they needed a file number.
Oh, file number.
At that point, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Make that motion.
We'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. And a motion to issue the ORAD indicating the resource area is accurate.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Administrative discussion for certificate of compliance for 81 Ash Street.
81 Ash Street was the first house that was built out of the three that were such a bone of contention of all the neighbors down there. And it is now ready to be issued a certificate. It was no issues with it at all.
Right. Any questions? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to issue certificate of compliance without a bond.
Make the motion.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Number 6, I think, is 153 Scotland Street.
Would you like to sign this one as we go?
153 is the one that has the ponding problems between neighbors and so forth. The engineer had presented us a plan at the past meeting that indicated that they're now have the existing conditions and they're working on the design, and I've heard from him and he's still working on it, but he is spending a little bit more time and concentration on the next one that's on the agenda, which is the 373 Crescent Street. And so I'll just keep in contact with the engineer to see how things are going so that it doesn't get put on the back burner.
All right.
Right into 373 Crescent Street. They are preparing a site plan for the to be turned into the town for a special permit for a contractor's yard and contractor bay setup where the buildings will be partitioned off to be able to rent to local contractors who need a space for a vehicle and their equipment. And there'd be individual, and they have to do some septic system work, and they have to do some restoration work because we found they encroached into the 50-foot buffer, and they need to do some stormwater work. So I saw a progress print on that and made some suggestions to the engineer about his stormwater system, and he's going to be looking at that. And so I'll just like on the other one, I'll stay in contact with them and keep the commission informed.
You know, I asked my son, he said that was owned under residential.
It's a grandfather non-conforming lot, so they can continue the use that was there.
All right,
And
when he said that, I was thinking about that after I left. I'm like, wait a minute, how can that be? If it's residential, how can you run a business out of that?
and that's why they need a special permit
Yeah.
to continue it. Plus, it's in a water resource district, so they need a special permit on that. So, and they need to do the stormwater with us.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is that it's grandfathered.
Yeah.
All right. We also have a request to continue Luke Estates to the May 7th meeting.
Was that on for tonight?
Yeah, to continue it because it would be on for next week.
Well, we can't. If it was continued to
To
next
that,
week,
then we have to wait until next
we
week
have
to
to-
continue.
Well, it
it.
wasn't. It was continued.
So many times.
It's been continued so many times, and each time it's bumped up.
Yeah.
But our,
So I think we should wait till next
okay,
week.
so
if that's
we'll
what
do
it's
it
supposed
next time.
Okay.
Did the gentleman call you on that? Steve Warrington? Or you called you?
Oh, yes.
Did he call you?
Yep.
He had some, well, he called me,
Why don't you keep that one with the...
tried to say some stuff. I said, well, best I knew. Oh, Johnny's in the office. I think I'll be right there.
Yes, two people have called. One was the one that you suggested, and then a real estate agent who's got someone who's interested in one of the lots also called. So I'm meeting with the real estate agent Thursday, and I offered the same to the person that you had recommended calling in, and I don't know where that's going yet, but if he wants to have a meeting.
I said something. I said, it's good that you're doing that, but that buyer beware.
Oh, definitely.
So,
And then we have a letter from Philip C. Tuck about some land. Just a copy of him. Quickly reading this, it looks like it's connects to other parcels that we do own.
No, those are three separate things. But he put them all in one letter.
Yeah,
So does everybody have a copy?
So the one he's talking about is the one that he was looking for you to purchase, is the one that's off the highway, that's landlocked
okay.
near West Meadow.
That would be the one that's shown like
Is
this.
the finger at the top of the okay. Which, I mean, that's the last part of his letter that he sent us. And
Yeah.
I understand his predicament, but I'm not looking to buy landlocked land. That,
I mean, if it had a connection and it was something that was really valuable in terms of
if there was habitat there
Yeah.
or an endangered species breeding or something that we really needed to.
but being just wetlands and can't be built upon, it's protected. So there's no sense trying to protect it by us owning it.
Right.
So I would say that
The Division of Fisheries has been reformed too.
the last one here is Reynolds Landing.
He mentioned that here.
So that's already an existing conservation parcel and some town-owned due to taking it for taxes. But it's so wet you can't possibly
Do anything with it, anyways.
And we're already running some trails over that portion anyway, and it's actually some of the fellows who are working on that project on Reynolds Landing have done a great job. They've done, the volunteer group really did a nice job. I'll take some pictures of it and be able to put them online and also let the commission see them. And they did a nice job.
One of the things, I think the only thing left is I had Kitty put on, we just keep referring to the land on Scotland Street as the land on Scotland Street. It would be nice to actually call it something.
110 acres?
Yeah, the 110 acre woods. I mean, we could put Winnie the Pooh and his friends down there. I mean, if anybody could, if we want to just think about it for next meeting, or whether you want to just adopt it and call it Scotland Acres, or, I mean, we should come up with something so we just,
Scotland Acres.
I mean, if Scotland Acres work, we can just vote to adopt that. And
Plenty of acreage.
Yeah, works.
I'll entertain a motion, we accept the name of Scotland Acres.
I'll make that.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second that.
Move in second, all those in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
First one tonight.
And does anybody else have anything else?
I do.
Yes.
And I have one thing. Too.
Oh, let's-
Just-
Okay.
It's just CPA. I was at the last meeting and she had a great presentation on Skin Milk Bridge.
Oh.
And how they're going to want some some money to build it and help it and all that kind of stuff. So I think you get a kick out of it. What is it? Skin Milk Bridge. But again, with CPA they also have money that's being requested for the playground. That might take a good chunk of the money, but this is on the agenda. and it's down there where all the stuff is and
Yeah,
airplane.
good.
And, you know, so it was really interesting. You know her, right?
Joan Pierce?
Joan, yes.
And what is it that you're thinking of doing?
Well, she was asking for some money for to help preserve or protect. I'm not exactly sure, but she was presenting, the history, and it was interesting, and it was. But that's on the agenda for the next meeting. So, and I think that's probably like a year away to even talk about that. But I just thought you might make that little.
You know,
Like,
it's like for something like that, if we wanted to like be part of that on the delineation fees, right? Say if we bumped it up to $3, we took $1 of that through the whole year and put it away.
towards it.
Can
Yeah.
we put that towards it as a something like that? Can we do that?
your fee schedule is a regulation fee schedule, so you could put it in the paper that you wanted to do that, and at a regular meeting, have a public hearing about it, close the public hearing, and then make a decision whether you want to do that after any public input, if there's any, and then you could do it.
That's a good
Stuff like
idea.
that would be
That's a
like
good
a
idea. Yeah.
little extra money that
Right.
it's not that we have to pull it out of anything, and we'll set it aside for something like that.
Right.
Where would it come from? Raise what, the fees?
Well,
The-
instead of
The
$2,
delineation fee that we,
Yeah.
we do it to $3, and then over the year, or we just put it out of the side in case something like this comes up. That we can kind of like.
Because that goes into the general fund?
No, like,
No, that's
oh, wait a minute, that does go in.
Oh, it does?
No, it would have to be dedicated for CPA.
No, but what I'm saying is the
Delineation.
right, the
delineation
delineation
Oh, the
fee
is a,
goes into the,
but you could you could
You could take the dollar.
do it in the public hearing. You could say that $2 will go to the
Yes,
general
fund,
and $1 will go
Yeah.
to the trails account, or whatever you want to call it,
or trail and restoration fund.
or
something.
the Skim Milk Bridge
Yeah.
project.
Okay.
And
A few dollars on that.
Yeah.
You raised it a buck.
Well, we won't have to take it from anything.
then you could decide what projects might be exempt from
Yeah.
that extra fee, like
True.
maybe septic system upgrades and things where they're already paying a lot of money
Yeah.
to upgrade their system. Why whack them with the
True.
additional?
Good idea.
But I mean, that's what you talk about at a public hearing. So
Okay.
that
Otherwise, where will we get the money?
Right.
True. I mean, there's no
And
subject.
it takes it away from the taxpayer.
Well, that's the thing. There's no-
Taxpayers already contributing to that fund. So.
True, and I don't want to
Right,
take
exactly.
anything from being
Yeah.
already indebted.
good idea.
Yeah,
So-
it is. I like it.
So if you want to do that, we would have to decide
To advertise it and then.
when we're going to advertise, when it's going to be. So do you want it right away, or?
Well, considering that you said it's a year old.
Well, that particular one, no,
Yeah.
for Skim Mill, because they have other requests coming in,
Yep.
and I think the playground.
Well,
So
we could set it
I mean,
aside.
I have paper I can bring in. You could see what kind of funding and what they're looking for.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah,
So we need a little bit of time to put that together, Kitty. So probably the second meeting in April, we could have a public hearing on that fee.
And I would suggest we just make it a fee schedule and don't make it a limit. Just make it a separate fund and just add it to it so that it can,
add to it.
over 5-10 years or whatever it takes, start building it up. That
We could add it to projects that we wanted to go to.
right. 'Cause I mean, I have a feeling before too long we're going to see something has to happen with the boat on the town river. Because that boat may be sinking more than it already is, and we may have to. And I think that's under us that we have to fund that, not the town park. I think the boat is ours.
Some
Well,
I-
I don't know, because
There's been discrepancies over my tenure here that
I believe that Chris has discovered or discerned that it is under under the park's discipline. So he adopted the park.
so he's
maybe
adopted
he
our
now
boat.
owns the boat.
do we have to call him captain?
the space between the boat and the southerly bank seems to be getting sediments in there, and the vegetation is growing up. So I don't know just how a project like that would be started, but we should be considering some ecological restoration project for that, and it's probably an expensive proposition, but if we don't start thinking about it today, it just puts you that much farther back down the road, behind the schedule. So I can do a little bit of research and see how something like that is handled. Most likely it would have to be one of the engineering firms that tears down dams and other restoration type projects where they're rehabbing a river or a stream crossings, those kind of things. And I think you need that kind of expertise. So I'll look into that and I can report about it at a later date. But sooner or later we're going to have to deal with it. And it seems like it's getting worse every year.
That's the stone boat you're talking about still, yeah.
Pretty soon you won't have to take a boat over to it. You can walk across.
Especially in the summer.
Is it a paddle boat?
It's the boat we're talking about, the stone one that's down at the town park by the.
It's like an island. It's a little island. And
It's really an island, but it's made of stone and it was piled up and it looks the shape of a boat.
Okay,
And
okay, gotcha.
so it's kind of referred to as the stone boat.
Where'd it come? Is it some structure? Was it a structure?
Yeah, it was a
It
structure.
was a large meteorite that dissolved when it hit the water.
Oh.
You had something else, John?
I think that's it. Oh, yes, I did. I'm sorry.
I knew there was something.
I was just going to say, just a reminder.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
We have 5 Chromebooks, and you're going to be taking them home tonight. Steve isn't here, so I'm going to be seeing him
I'll
on.
get my mouse going on it.
I'm going to see Steve on Thursday, so I'll give him this one. But if Steve was here and Paula was here, she wouldn't have one. So I'm thinking that we should get at least one more for Paula, or an alternate, let's just say, and that way everybody can have one. I can bring my laptop down. Kitty has hers, so I think we really need to get another one. And so if the commission is so inclined, we have some money in the budget. I will put out the feelers to Ed Sorrow and see if he can get us another one.
Yeah,
If
find out
the
what the
commission wants
pricing
to.
is, and then we can.
So for the next meeting?
Yep. And Kitty, you have something for us to sign?
I have many things.
A couple
to
things?
sign.
Number of things?
Yes. This is for the new pole.
We're not leaving out the Irish, are we?
No, it wasn't spelled the same. And this one is for South Street. And this one is
Keep them
for-
coming.
This one is for Cochise Estates. We signed it last time, but we discerned that there was a change in who owned it, so we had to change the paper, so now you get to sign it again. And now I also have 3 invoices for payment that need signing.
The mileage is on 2 different sheets because the IRS had a rate for last year's mileage and a new one for this year's, so that's why it's 2 sheets.
Going down?
Went up. Roughly 6 cents, I think.
Pretty
Wow.
good. Pretty good. Remember when it used to be 22 cents?
Is that gas?
I think it's time we got John a bicycle.
I could buy one with that one.
Yeah!
How about a Conservation Commission truck?
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Capital equipment.
It would have to be green.
FinCom got to
You
approve
could
that
get a
one?
hydrogen.
FinCom got.
Throw it in.
They could write
Capital
smart
budget.
It's only $50,000. Toyota.
For a while, I thought we might have one because they were talking about taking that old black building inspector's car, if you remember what it used to be parked out there, and they were going to rehab that, and it would be like a pool vehicle where.
Chris wants a new one, and that would leave his truck over there. Isn't that bad a shape?
I thought the one that they got was supposed to be for the whole thing. Isn't it a DPW?
Nice pile of them. There you go, sign away.
Crazy.
Yeah, they have one for highway department.
Yeah, but it's a DPW now, so that should be for every for the whole thing.
I would think so.
I would say something that would be.
Anything else?
You're right.
Not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
And what time is it?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Second.
Moved and second, all those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye. We're off.
And what
With
time is
the
it?
hollow woohoo.
20.
8:19.